The station hung silently in the void, a gleaming structure of metal and glass floating like a lonely crystal in the darkness. From the outside, it seemed perfect, organized, and calm. Inside, however, it was a place of whispers, suspicion, and quiet judgment. Zarathus moved along the lower decks, her long, lithe form slipping between shadowed corridors. Her skin shimmered faintly in pale blues and silvers, a mark of her Valari heritage, but most on the station did not see beauty. They saw the past. They saw the betrayal of her people, a war decades ago, and they remembered it in every cold glance, every silent snub. She paused beside a broken energy conduit, sighing as the hum of power faltered around her. Sparks danced in tiny arcs, and she carefully adjusted the panels, her fingers moving with delicate precision. If anyone had watched her, they might have admired the ease with which she handled the repair. But no one did. No one ever did. Zarathus. A voice hissed from a nearby corridor. She looked up to see a group of alien engineers, their forms sharp and angular, their eyes flicking toward her with contempt. "Leave her," one muttered. "She'll just make it worse." Another laughed softly, a sound like grinding stone. "You know how she is. She causes more trouble than she solves." Zarathus said nothing. She had long since stopped defending herself. Words were useless here. Every time she tried, every time she spoke, her voice bounced off walls of distrust. She learned quickly. The quieter she stayed, the less attention she drew. That meant fewer insults, fewer assignments to clean areas alone, fewer moments when someone would blame her for things that went wrong. The corridor emptied and she bent back over the conduit. Her hands were steady, but inside her heart ached. She remembered the early days on this station when she had hoped for acceptance, when she had tried to make friends among the various species. She had offered help, shared knowledge, even saved a few lives during minor emergencies. But trust was a fragile thing, and once it was broken, it could not be repaired. For years she worked in silence. Repairs, maintenance, data recalibrations. She became essential in her skill but invisible in her presence. Nobody asked her advice, nobody included her in meetings, and nobody spoke her name except in whispers of blame. Her thoughts drifted as she worked. Memories of her family on Valari Prime, of laughter and warmth, felt like another lifetime. She missed it, though she had learned to hide that pain beneath her professional exterior. She had to survive. Out here, in neutral space, survival often meant invisibility. A sudden alarm cut through the quiet, sharp and urgent. The conduit shuddered, sparks flying as systems overloaded. Zarathus moved quickly, adjusting panels and redirecting energy flows. The station's hum stabilized. A sigh escaped her, though it was muffled beneath the mask of calm she always wore. "You've done it again," a mechanical voice said nearby. The automated system's tone was neutral, but it felt like a small pat on the back. She allowed herself a tiny smile, and then the silence returned. No one came to see. No one cared. She finished the repair and stepped back. Her movements were smooth, almost elegant, but her eyes held a shadow of loneliness. She glanced toward the upper decks where the social areas were, cafeterias filled with laughter, corridors buzzing with conversation, but she did not go there. They would not speak to her, not today, not tomorrow. Hours passed and Zarathus continued her work. Panels, conduits, and energy cores. It was endless. And then at last she paused, leaning against the cool metal wall. She stared out of a window, toward the stars. Black stretched endlessly, dotted with points of distant light. Sometimes she thought she would rather drift out there, alone among the stars, where no judgment followed her, where no whispers haunted her ears. The intercom crackled, breaking the silence. "Station command to all personnel. Human team arriving in 10 minutes. Prepare docking bay 4. Zarathus tilted her head. Humans were rare here, usually part of interstellar projects, trades, or missions. She had seen them before. Loud, curious, and remarkably persistent, but she had little interest. They would arrive, speak to the station leaders, and probably ignore her, just like everyone else. She shrugged lightly and returned to her work. When the docking bay lights flickered, on signaling the incoming ships, she glanced at the entrance. The bay doors opened and a small shuttle glided in, bright lights illuminating the deck. A group of humans stepped out carrying tools, devices, and equipment she didn't recognize. They moved with confidence, speaking to each other in a language she could understand with effort. Her attention caught on one of them. A man in his late 20s, lean with sharp eyes and a careful, precise way of moving. He scanned the docking bay quickly, then paused, as if sensing something invisible in the space around him. His gaze moved directly toward her, though she was off to the side, crouched over a console. Zarathis froze. It was strange. No one looked at her like that. Not the council, not the other engineers, not even the rare visitors who came here and left in a day. Something in the human's eyes was not contempt, not fear, not judgment. Curiosity? Respect? He approached slowly, deliberately, and nodded once. "You're Zarathis, right?" His voice was calm, steady, without any accusation or mockery. She stiffened but did not reply. Words were dangerous. "I'm Marcus Hale," he said, crouching beside her. "I heard this section has been unstable. I can help if you like." Zarathis blinked. Help? From a human? From someone who had just arrived? It was unheard of. She had grown used to silence, avoidance, and subtle scorn. She had not expected this. After a long moment, she nodded slightly. Marcus smiled faintly, and together they began inspecting the conduit. His questions were simple but thoughtful. He listened when she spoke, nodded when she suggested adjustments, and offered ideas that she had not considered. For the first time in years, Zarathis felt a small spark of something she thought she had lost: hope. Maybe, just maybe, not everyone saw her as an outcast. The stars outside twinkled silently, indifferent to her small moment of connection. Yet inside, something shifted. A human had arrived, and he had chosen to stand beside her, and for Zarathis, that made all the difference. The station had always been a place of routine for Zarathis, where she moved quietly through the corridors and shadows. But now the presence of the human engineer, Marcus Hale, brought a subtle disturbance, a small ripple that felt strange and unexpected. He did not look away, did not whisper behind his hand, and most of all, he did not judge her. That alone was enough to unsettle her. Marcus followed her to the lower decks, carrying a toolkit that seemed far too small for the complexity of the station's systems. "So this is where the problems are worst," he said, scanning the conduits and control panels. His voice was calm, steady, without any hint of impatience or fear. Zarathis inclined her head slightly, motioning for him to follow her inspection path. "Many have tried to fix these circuits before," she said quietly. "Most leave in frustration." Marcus nodded. "I'm patient," he replied simply. That one word made her pause. She was not used to patience. She was used to scorn, complaints, or silent avoidance. He seemed different. They worked side by side, moving carefully through the maze of panels, wires, and energy conduits. Marcus asked questions, not because he doubted her, but because he wanted to understand. Every time she explained a system or suggested an adjustment, he listened attentively, nodding and sometimes sketching small diagrams on a datapad. Hours passed, and Zarathis began to notice something strange. The presence of another person, someone who trusted her knowledge, made her work feel less like a lonely struggle and more like a shared effort. She started pointing out small optimizations, shortcuts, and hidden weaknesses in the system that no one had asked about for years. Marcus took notes and applied her suggestions immediately, testing, adjusting, and perfecting each section. "You know this station better than anyone," Marcus said after a while, straightening from a crouched position. "It's amazing how much knowledge is locked in your head." Zarathis blinked. No one had said anything like that in years. Knowledge was power, yes, But in her case, it had become a source of isolation. People did not appreciate it. They feared it, avoided it, or used it as an excuse to keep her separate. Marcus's words, simple as they were, felt like sunlight cutting through the gloom. "Thank you," she said softly. It was the first time she had spoken openly to someone in what felt like a long time. Marcus smiled, not with smugness or arrogance, but with quiet acknowledgement. "We make a good team," he said. The lower decks hummed with activity as the two moved from one problem to another. Broken conduits, failing power relays, misaligned sensors. Each was a challenge, but together they found solutions faster than Zarathis had thought possible. Occasionally she caught glimpses of the station's other engineers peering around corners, watching the strange pairing. Whispers began to rise. "The human works with Zarathis? Why is he helping her? Is he on her side?" Zarathis felt a mixture of surprise and wariness. She had been trained to expect hostility, not curiosity, and certainly not respect. Still, she did not let the attention distract her. She focused on the work, letting Marcus guide the repairs where necessary, but always with her insight leading the way. By midday, the main power grid of the lower decks was stabilized. Lights flickered steadily, and the hum of Machoth and Kant. The station hummed with renewed energy. Zarathis moved through the corridors with Marcus Hale close behind, their combined presence drawing quiet attention. Some crew members whispered as they passed, but Zarathis ignored them. She had learned long ago that gossip could not harm her if she refused to let it. Marcus, however, noticed the stares. "You're good at this," he said as they checked another failing power panel. "People just don't know it yet." Zarathis shook her head. "It's not that they don't know. They choose not to see." Marcus frowned but didn't argue. Instead, he offered ideas, suggestions that complemented her knowledge. Together, they moved with efficiency that impressed even the station's more skeptical engineers. But as the day progressed, Zarathis felt unease creeping back. The whispers had grown louder. Some engineers openly avoided her, and a few of the station officers cast cold, judging glances. They were watching her, waiting for a mistake, ready to blame her for anything that went wrong. The tension came to a head when an emergency alarm blared through the station. Red lights flashed across, the decks casting sharp shadows. A massive energy surge threatened to overload the main reactor. Panels sparked violently and warning sirens blared. Zarathis moved instantly, analyzing the situation. "The surge is coming from the auxiliary cores. If it reaches the main reactor, it could trigger a meltdown." A nearby officer scoffed. "We don't need her input. Step aside, Valari. We know what we're doing." Zarathis clenched her fists but didn't respond. She knew arguing would do no good. The officers would only ignore her as they always had. Instead, she turned to Marcus. "Marcus," she said urgently, "we need to reroute power through the secondary conduits. I can guide you." Marcus didn't hesitate. He nodded and followed, her instructions working quickly to stabilize the surge. The other engineers watched, some skeptical, some curious. Marcus's presence seemed to lend her authority. When she directed him, he obeyed without question, showing his trust in her knowledge. "Divert 20% to the auxiliary buffer," Zarathis instructed, pointing to panels that had been neglected for years. Sparks flew, and her hands moved with precision, adjusting delicate circuits. Marcus followed her lead, rerouting energy, sealing weak points, and reinforcing the core. Minutes passed like hours. The tension was unbearable. Then, with a final adjustment, the alarms ceased. The lights returned to their normal glow and the hum of the reactor steadied. The officers were silent. The other engineers stared in shock. Zarathis exhaled, leaning against a panel, exhausted but relieved. Marcus gave her a quick nod, a small smile of quiet pride. "We did it," he said. Finally, one of the senior engineers spoke. "I didn't think she could do it." His voice was grudging but honest. "She knows this station better than anyone here." Zarathis's heart beat fast. Recognition was rare, praise even rarer. But she did not let herself smile too widely. She had learned to temper her emotions. Marcus, however, did not hold back. "I told you," he said softly, just loud enough for others to hear. "She's brilliant. And if you'd listened earlier, this wouldn't have been such a risk." The murmurs around the room shifted. Some eyes that had been cold now regarded her with curiosity, some even with respect. The ice that had surrounded Zarathus for years had begun to crack, and Marcus had pushed it gently. Later, they moved to inspect the auxiliary systems. The station's council had called an urgent meeting, but Zarathus did not attend. She knew it would be filled with skepticism, and she preferred to act rather than argue. Marcus, however, had taken the opportunity to quietly speak on her behalf. "They should listen to her," he told the council. "She knows more about the station than anyone alive. Ignoring her is dangerous." The council exchanged uncertain glances. No human had ever dared speak with such bluntness in front of the officers. Before, some were offended, others intrigued. The message was clear. Marcus trusted Zarathus, and that mattered more than they expected. That evening, the lower decks were calm again. Zarathus and Marcus sat together, reviewing schematics and making plans for preventive maintenance. She realized that she was no longer completely alone. His presence was more than companionship. It was an acknowledgement of her skill and her worth. But even as she felt hope, a shadow lingered. Whispers of dissatisfaction and doubt remained in the corners of the station. Some still believed she was dangerous, a liability. Others wondered why a human would stand beside someone so reviled. And somewhere deep in the council, a seed of opposition had taken root, watching her carefully. Zarathus did not dwell on it. She focused on the work, letting her hands move with practiced skill. Marcus's calm confidence allowed her to act freely, to take risks that would have seemed reckless alone. Together, they began stabilizing older systems that had been neglected. For decades, discovering hidden flaws and forgotten features. "Your solutions are different," Marcus said at one point. "I would not have thought of that. Humans often see problems differently, but you anticipate them." Zarathus glanced at him. She knew the truth. It was not merely anticipation. It was experience, patience, and the necessity of surviving in a place that had rejected her. Humans had ingenuity, yes, but she had learned to adapt, to think ahead, and to endure. Together they formed a balance, human creativity and Valari precision. Word spread quickly. Crew members who had avoided her now paused in the corridors, watching her work. Some tried to imitate her methods, others simply observed. The first, small signs of respect began to emerge. It was subtle. A nod, a glance, a quiet acknowledgement. But it was enough to make Zarathus feel that perhaps she had a chance to change her place in the station. That night, as the station lights dimmed and the corridors quieted, Zarathus looked out the window at the stars. The black emptiness stretched endlessly, but it no longer felt lonely. Marcus had arrived and chosen to stand with her. And that small choice, that simple act of trust, had begun to shift the tides. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring new challenges. The whispers might grow louder, the council might resist her input, and not everyone would accept her. But for the first time in years, Zarathus felt prepared. She had an ally who believed in her, and together, they might just be able to face the station's doubts, and whatever dangers the void beyond the walls could bring. In the distance, a faint hum signaled the station's ongoing operation, steady and reliable. Zarathus allowed herself a small, rare smile. Perhaps she was not completely alone after all. The station had quieted after the previous day's crisis, but the sense of unease lingered. Zarathus moved through the maintenance corridors, checking systems that she knew better than anyone else. Marcus followed, datapad in hand, ready to assist whenever needed. Together they were becoming a force, though many still whispered behind their backs. Zarathus paused beside a series of old conduits, her eyes scanning the intricate network of wires and energy nodes. Something felt wrong. The hum of power was uneven, subtle, almost imperceptible. She frowned, crouching to inspect the connections. Marcus watched, noting her attention to detail. "What is it?" he asked. "There's something hidden here," Zarathus said softly. "This section was modified long ago. The changes are not documented anywhere." Marcus leaned closer. "Modified? By who?" Zarathus shook her head. "I don't know, but it wasn't recent. Decades, maybe centuries ago. Someone wanted this part of the station to remain secret." Curiosity sparked in Marcus's eyes. "Do you think it could help with the system's stability?" Zarathus nodded slowly. "It could, but it's risky. If mismanaged, it could trigger a cascade failure." Marcus grinned just slightly. "I like risk, especially when you're in charge." Zarathus allowed herself a faint smile. Working with him was different. He trusted her. He listened. He didn't judge. For the first time in years, she felt that her knowledge could be a gift rather than a burden. As they carefully navigated the hidden conduits, Zarathus uncovered ancient control nodes, long neglected and almost forgotten. They were connected to a section of the station that had been sealed off, supposedly abandoned. The technology was old, strange even to the current engineers, but Zarathus recognized its design instantly. "This is Valari engineering," she whispered. "Advanced systems hidden inside the station's core. No one has touched them for decades." Marcus's eyes widened. "You knew this existed?" Zarathus shook her head. "Only in theory. Records mention hidden systems, but the details were erased. My ancestors built these cores. I can understand them, but it requires precision." He nodded. "Then let's be precise." Working together, they activated the ancient nodes, carefully balancing power flows and monitoring each reaction. The conduits hummed in harmony as energy shifted smoothly, filling gaps that had caused previous instability. Systems stabilized, and lights throughout the lower decks flickered to life, brighter and steadier than before. Zarathus exhaled, relief washing over her. "It's working," she said softly. "If anyone else had tried this without knowledge of the old systems, they would have destroyed half the station." Marcus glanced at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "You saved the station again. But this time, you're not alone." Their small victory was interrupted by a sudden alert. The communications array blinked urgently. A fleet of unknown ships had been detected approaching the station. Their signature was unfamiliar, hostile, silent, and advanced. Marathi 6 Chow. The station trembled as the first enemy ships appeared on the sensor grid. Dark silhouettes moved in formation, silent and precise. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the corridors, casting sharp shadows on walls and floors. Crew members rushed to stations, checking weapons, shields, and communications. Zarathus stood at the control console, Marcus beside her. Both of them were calm, but inside, adrenaline surged. This was the moment they had prepared for, the moment to see if their combined knowledge and ingenuity could truly save the station. "They're coordinating their approach," Zarathus said, her eyes scanning the sensor readouts. "They've analyzed our patterns. They expect us to react like we always have." Marcus frowned. "Then we won't react like we always have." Zarathus allowed herself a small smile. His confidence was contagious. "Divert power to the outer shields and activate the auxiliary traps," she ordered. Crew members scrambled to follow her instructions. Panels lit up, and energy barriers glowed with a fierce intensity, ready to withstand the initial attack. The first enemy ship fired. Plasma beams streaked through space, striking the station's shields with violent force. Sparks flew along the outer hull, and the hum of the energy fields rose to a high pitch. Some of the older crew hesitated, unsure if the shields could hold. Zarathus moved swiftly, her hands flying over controls, rerouting power in real time. "Shields holding at 75%, Marcus reported, diverting another 20% to the reinforced grids. The station shuddered but did not break. Zarathus's eyes flicked over the systems. "Activate the hidden conduits," she said. "The ones we integrated earlier. They're untested in battle, but they can absorb and redirect energy surges." Marcus nodded. "On it." He moved quickly, accessing the concealed nodes they had discovered days ago. Energy flowed through the old Valari systems, pulsating through the station like a living heartbeat. The shield strengthened, and the auxiliary barriers absorbed several plasma blasts, keeping the main reactor stable. The enemy fleet pressed forward, relentless and coordinated. Smaller ships attempted to breach the station's defense grids, aiming for weak points. Zarathis and Marcus worked seamlessly, adjusting power flows, sealing hull breaches and redirecting energy to where it was most needed. "Main reactor approaching critical load," a crew member shouted. "Not if we manage it together," Zarathis replied firmly. She directed Marcus's attention to a series of control nodes. "We need to reroute the excess energy here and here. Timing is everything." Marcus's fingers moved quickly across the panels. Sparks danced briefly as circuits realigned, but the energy stabilized. Crew members around them cheered quietly, gaining confidence as the two leaders took control of the chaos. Suddenly, an enemy ship broke through one of the auxiliary barriers, targeting the main docking bay. Explosions rocked the corridor, sending debris flying. Zarathis reacted instantly, sealing the breach with emergency shutters and rerouting life support systems. Marcus pulled her back just in time as a blast shook the floor. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. "I am," she said, brushing dust from her shoulders. "But we need to move. That ship won't wait for us to recover." They coordinated the crew, directing fire from station turrets and activating concealed traps in the docking bay. A series of small but clever maneuvers slowed the enemy ship, forcing it to retreat. Other ships paused, assessing the unexpected resistance. "Human ingenuity combined with Valari precision," Zarathis murmured almost to herself. Marcus laughed softly. "That's what I'm here for." As the battle continued, the station's crew became increasingly confident. Even the skeptics began following Zarathis's instructions, inspired by her calm determination and Marcus's unwavering support. Small victories added up. Damaged enemy ships were forced back, shields held firm, and power systems stabilized despite repeated attacks. The turning point came when Zarathis spotted a pattern in the enemy fleet's movements. "They're focusing on our weak points," she said. "But if we simulate a reactor failure in the eastern grid, they'll commit ships there. We can trap them." Marcus grinned. "Let's make them fall for it." Together they implemented the plan. The eastern grid displayed a false overload, drawing enemy ships into a narrow channel. Hidden energy traps activated, striking the intruders with precision. Explosions rocked the void as ships were disabled or forced to retreat. The remaining fleet hesitated. They had not anticipated such strategy. Zarathis and Marcus seized the moment, coordinating every turret, barrier, and conduit to push the invaders further back. Within an hour, the enemy retreated entirely, disappearing into the darkness of space. The station trembled once more as the final energy surges passed, then settled into a steady hum. Silence followed. A tense, exhausted silence, before cheers, and applause erupted throughout the corridors. Crew members clapped, hugged, and celebrated their survival. Zarathis stood quietly, surveying the scene. Marcus remained beside her, calm but proud. "We did it," he said. "Yes," she replied softly. "Together." The council, previously skeptical, finally approached. Some bowed in acknowledgement, others offered handshakes. Zarathis met their eyes, steady and confident, and for the first time she felt that her place in the station had changed. She had been ignored, avoided, and judged, but her knowledge and courage had made the difference. Marcus stepped forward, smiling faintly. "She led this defense. I only helped where I could. Without her, we would have failed." The council murmured among themselves, clearly impressed. Even the harshest skeptics nodded. The outcast alien who had once been avoided now stood recognized as a hero. Zarathis allowed herself a small smile. She glanced at Marcus. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For believing in me," she replied. "When no one else did," Marcus shook his head. "You don't need anyone's permission to prove yourself. You just needed someone willing to stand beside you." As the station began repairs from the battle, Zarathis felt something she had never felt before: belonging. The fear, isolation, and whispers had not vanished completely, but they no longer controlled her. She had allies, respect, and a voice. And beside her, a human engineer had shown her that trust and cooperation could change everything. The stars outside twinkled silently, indifferent observers of the battle that had just passed. Yet within the station a new light shone, the courage of an outcast, strengthened by human ingenuity, proving that even in the vast emptiness of space, cooperation and skill could triumph over fear and prejudice. Zarathis allowed herself one deep breath. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they had won. Together. The battle was over, but the station still vibrated with tension. Sparks flickered from damaged panels, and corridors were littered with debris. Crew members moved quickly, repairing hull breaches, reinforcing shields, and recalibrating the energy systems. Zarathis walked alongside Marcus, checking the critical areas she had saved during the fight. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of calm that was not loneliness. She was no longer an outcast. She was no longer ignored. Her hands had built, fixed, and saved more than machinery. They had earned trust. And beside her, Marcus moved with quiet confidence, offering support and encouragement. Together, they had turned near certain defeat into victory. The council gathered in the main command room. Their faces were a mixture of awe, respect, and lingering uncertainty. Some of the leaders, previously skeptical, now nodded in acknowledgement as Zarathis entered. Whispers had spread throughout the station about her critical role in the defense, and even the harshest critics had no choice but to recognize her achievement. "Zarathis," one officer began, voice steady, "your knowledge and quick thinking saved this station. Without your guidance, we would have lost everything." Zarathis inclined her head, allowing a faint smile. "I only did what was necessary," she said softly. "The crew and Marcus made it possible. I could not have done it alone." Marcus stepped forward, his expression serious. "It's true. She led the defense. I only assisted. Her strategies, her understanding of the systems, and her calm decision-making kept us alive." The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted in quiet approval. Crew members clapped, others nodded, and a few even offered handshakes. Zarathis felt a warmth she had never known. The station, once a place of cold glances and whispers, now buzzed with recognition and respect. Later, in the lower decks, Zarathis walked past engineers who had once avoided her. Some stopped to nod politely, others offered words of gratitude. She smiled softly. These small gestures mattered more than applause. They were evidence that she had changed her place in this community, that her voice now carried weight. Marcus followed her silently. "You did more than save the station today," he said quietly. "You changed how people see you." Zarathis shook her head. "I didn't change. I only showed them what they refused to see before." "And that's enough," he replied, a small smile on his lips. "It's more than enough." The station's system stabilized fully, and a sense of normalcy began to return. Crew members resumed their daily tasks, but a new energy lingered in the air. People were no longer afraid to seek Zarathis's advice. Some even volunteered to work with her, eager to learn from the Valari who had saved them all. That evening, Marcus and Zarathis sat in the observation deck, watching the stars' stretchy lights reflay.